Why, Marge? Why? Hope you're doing well. For today's video we will be reading Billy Summers. If you're unsure of what this book is, it's obviously the new Stephen King book and it came out as I'm filming this around like 2 weeks ago. This is just going to be like a rundown of me reading Billy Summers, but also a little bit of like life stuff sort of mixed in as well. So if you are interested in seeing what I get up to, here's a little insight into my life as well. Chapter 4 of Billy Summers so far. I'm enjoying it so far. It's quite a slow start, which is not a bad thing. Also, shout out to my jumper. It's the Confidence Club and it's made by Dreamer Collections on Instagram, and they make the most cozy jumpers. Like, I don't know if you can see, but oh, it is literally so comfy. I think I'm on about page 85 now, so coming up to 100 pages. It's not the best Stephen King book that I've read, but then this is only my 6th or 7th Stephen King book, so I've got a long way to go. I'm enjoying it. I really like Billy Summers as a character. I think he's really interesting and I'm liking the sort of different personas and things that he's taken on. The only thing I will say is that the pacing is quite slow. I'm hoping that it starts to pick up. I'm liking that it sort of flashes back to the past when he's writing and sort of goes into his like life a little bit more. That's really interesting because I didn't expect it to do that. Toby's up in the office with me. Oh, what's going on? Oops. So I'm on chapter 15 now, so I'm about 240 pages into the book. I've got a lot of thoughts on this book. I like that there's a lot of plot, so it's quite intricate in the sense that there's like a lot going on. Ooh, got one stray bit of hair. But as is a typical Stephen King book, it is quite long, and there's some parts of the book that I'm a bit like, oh, you know, when he just drags things on. Like, I really love how he's really good at world building, but sometimes in a book I feel like, especially when it's contemporary and it's not like fantasy or anything, like some of the stuff doesn't necessarily need to be in the book. I'm really liking how the story is sort of taken like a turn in a different direction. So like, without giving too much away, like the main plot has happened, but it happened sooner than I thought it was going to. Like, I thought the story was going to pan out in a certain way, but it's actually gone in another way, and I'm really intrigued to see like what's going to happen next now. But Stephen King, I think I need to do like a full video on this topic. The more I've been delving into Stephen King's work, the more I've had an issue with how he talks about women. And when I say women, I mean teenagers and children as well. When he's speaking about women in his book and younger girls, he just has a way of sexualizing them, and it's not a case of it being across all of his books. And I mean, I've only read a small portion so far. When I went into reading Stephen King, I knew that there were some issues with it and how it was very unnecessary considering that the book is about children, but I didn't quite realise that it was like a running theme across quite a lot of his books. I'm not sure how to feel about it. I struggle to understand his thought process behind this. I was talking to a few friends about it recently, and I'm not the only one that feels like this, which is good, because I think quite a lot of the time with like a big author like Stephen King, because so many people enjoy his work and he's seen as like a legend, I feel like it's almost taboo to sort of mention the things that are wrong with his books. But the thing is, like, when it comes to like authors and the content they create, I think it's important to address when something doesn't sit right with you, or if something is a little bit questionable. I'll link it back to Billy Summers because I've gone on a little bit of a rant here. Trigger warning, there's mentions of sexual assault and rape in this book, and it does go into some of the details of the aftermath, and it is slightly graphic, so that's something that if that's content you're uncomfortable reading, I would probably not read this book because it would potentially be very triggering for you. Some of the ways in which Stephen King deals with the aftermath of the rape in this book is okay, but there's some issues I had a problem with, and I just don't understand why they're in the book. There's just a scene where he's sort of like talking about how she's a teenager. It turns out I think she's 21 years old or 20 years old, so she is an adult. But in the book, like, he's mentioning like her breasts and that sort of thing, and I just think is a little bit distasteful after talking about a character that's been sexually assaulted and raped to go into detail about her breasts. And then there's one section in the book where the character is in bed with the girl after everything that's happened, and he gets an erection, and I just think, you've just talked about the character being quite young, and then you've gone on to talk about her breasts, and now all of a sudden you're talking about the main character getting an erection from being in bed with her after this has literally just happened to her. It wasn't the main character that did it, but like there's a lot of times then where he's sort of going into details about like she raised her hand and like her top comes up slightly and, you know, like almost reveals too much, or like that she wasn't wearing knickers and that sort of thing. And like I understand that it's coming from a male point of view and then the character is not perfect and that's like what it's portraying, but I just feel like it's a little bit distasteful. It's just a shame really, because like the book itself still could have contained the content and brought to light the situation about like a woman being drugged and that sort of thing, but it could have dealt with it in a lot better way. As I read more of his books, this is something that I probably will discuss more on my channel because I feel like it's important. I might get a lot of hate on this video for saying it, but at the end of the day, like I personally don't feel like sexualizing children, teenagers and women is okay. I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear other people's thoughts on this. In terms of like the rest of the book, because that is only a very small portion of it, but it will definitely affect like my overall rating of the book. I can see this book at the moment being a sort of 3/3.5 stars. So we're off to Oakwood Park with the family today, and I thought I would bring you along and add this to the vlog. I finally finished Billy Summers by Stephen King, and boy was that a journey. So I started reading this back in August, so the start of August. I've been in the worst reading slump the last couple of, I'd say weeks, but it's been months. This weekend I finally finished this book, and you know what? It was a lot better than I thought it was the last time I updated you. I enjoyed this overall. It wasn't my favourite Stephen King book that I've ever read, but it definitely wasn't the worst. And you know what I will say about this book is that it does have quite a strong ending, and I didn't think that I would be saying that about a Stephen King book, because we all know how notoriously bad he is for his endings. It sort of ends and then carries on and doesn't end how you think it's going to end, and that left me a bit shook. I'm torn with this book. I think it's going to be a 3.5 stars overall, because like I've already mentioned, I do have some issues with this book and some of the ways in which it deals with the content. But looking back at the book and Billy Summers as a character, like, I kind of get why Billy Summers did some of the things that he did, and I'm not sure if that is fully a reflection on Stephen King's writing, but rather is a reflection on the character. Linking back to what I said about sort of how Stephen King writes about women, like, he definitely writes about women from the view of a male gaze. I think like any male author will struggle not to write from a male gaze, so there's always going to be parts of his writing that I'm a bit like, oh, why does he need to sort of explain a woman in that sort of way? So like, it kind of, while it's not nice to read because it's a bit weird because of how young the character is, like, as the plot goes on, you kind of realise that the main character understands that and understands that it's wrong, and is sort of like a reflection of like men in general. I still don't fully agree with one section in the book. Slight spoilers here. A young girl gets sort of beaten to death, and there's talks about like how her breasts are never going to grow on her chest and that sort of thing. Like, that, I still draw a line at that. I still, you know, when it comes to stuff like that, I still think that's a little bit strange to include in a book. How Stephen King deals with the sexual assault is quite good. I mean, one of the ways in which one character deals with it isn't good, and it just makes him as bad as the person that did it, and I don't condone that at all, but that's a reflection again on the character and him acting in a certain way. I thought this book was very long. It didn't need to be as long as it was. It could easily have been about like 3/4 the length, and it probably would have read a lot better. As Stephen King characters go, he probably is up there with like one of my more favourite characters. I like that he wasn't perfect, and in some of the parts, like, you forget that Billy Summers is like a hired assassin and that he is a bad person, because no matter how good of a character he can be, essentially like what he does is wrong, and I think it's really good that that's sort of woven into the plot. I definitely enjoyed the first third of the book and the last third of the book, and the middle third of the book was where the book really let itself down, and the last time I updated you I was sort of in that middle third of the book, and I was like really like, it was a bit like a slog to read, you know, when you're just like, oh, what's gonna happen now? You're sort of like waiting in the limbo for other things to happen. But it definitely picked up again at the latter end of the book, and I really enjoyed it. I loved Alice as a character. I think she's definitely up there again with like my favourite Stephen King characters. I love like how strong-willed she is, and just how like she deals with everything. And what I did find interesting with this book as well, Stephen King deals a lot with panic attacks in this, and as somebody that's had panic attacks before, it's definitely portrayed well. And I think the way in which like the main character looks after Alice, while I said I kind of bordering creepy in some aspects, but for a lot of it, it is very endearing, and he sort of takes her under his wing, and the way in which their like friendship blossoms. And yeah, the ending, like, it was a little bit sad. What was interesting, there was hints at the pandemic in this book. There was also mentions of The Shining. There's also an LGBT rep in this. There's a gay character, and I really, really loved Becky. I thought he was a good character, and while again, like, he's a flawed character, he's not perfect, I like the way that he does look out for Alice. Marge, that's all I'm gonna say to end this review. Thank you very much for watching this video. If this is a kind of video that you enjoyed watching, let me know in the comments. I think I might try and do this with some more books. I know I've done it with A Court of Thorns and Roses and obviously now Billy Summers. Thank you so much for your recent support and engagement and likes and subscribes. Honestly, like, it doesn't go unnoticed, and it really, really does mean the world to me. If you did enjoy this, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment what your thoughts on Billy Summers was and if you're going to read it, and I will see you soon in the next video. Bye!